Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you very much for joining us on this webinar about visualizing the potential of America's family forests. I know that people are going to be joining across these first couple of minutes. Nonetheless, we're going to go ahead and get started because we have a fair amount to show you, and we also want to leave lots of time for questions for those of you who are on this webinar. So we're going to start with introductions of both me and Lynn Riley from the American Forest Foundation, and then we'll get started. Before we go to introductions, just one piece of housekeeping. If you have comments or questions, please use the Q&A function on Zoom to type out your questions, and we will either answer them as we go within that function, or we will speak them out loud and highlight them at the end of the webinar. So with that as a bit of housekeeping, let's start with introductions. And Lynn, why don't you kick us off and introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, thanks, Nate. So I'm Lynn Riley, also from American Forest Foundation, and I am the lead scientist here.
Excellent. And I am Nathan Truitt. I am the Executive Vice President of Climate Funding at the American Forest Foundation. So we're very pleased that you all could join us as we can talk about today a new tool that we have developed to help visualize the impacts of proper management within family forests. So we're going to start out with me giving you a bit of context about this tool that we have developed and the reasons behind it. And then Lynn is going to walk you through a couple of the more interesting and intriguing data sets that are in this tool. So with this, let's get kicked off. And Lynn, if you wouldn't mind advancing the next slide. Basically, as probably everyone on this webinar knows, family forests offer a lot of potential in terms of their environmental, economic, and social benefits. However, traditionally, they have been valued just according to a couple of those impacts. Timber for being one value, carbon being another. Every now and then you have a family forest that receives a revenue stream from some other impact. But by and large, these forests are being managed for timber and or carbon. And the rest of the benefits, although they certainly accrue and are important, are maybe underdeveloped, underutilized, or undercommunicated. So here at the American Forest Foundation, as we are developing through the Family Forest Carbon Program, a large project that both seeks to monetize the carbon value of forests while also improving the long-term timber value of those forests, we don't want to leave those other important forest values behind, both because they're important environmentally and socially to the whole country, but also because, as the National Woodland Owners Survey tells us, often those other values are the reason why families love and manage and are passionate about their properties. So we're working to both quantify those additional benefits and just to paint a more complete picture of what they are. One example of this is we've partnered with the Sorensen Impact Institute in order to fully catalog the various potential benefits of the Family Forest Carbon Program. And those, we've discovered that there are basically 5 buckets, none of which will be surprising to probably anyone on this webinar. The first is economic benefits, right? Both in terms of the funds that flow to landowners when they manage actively and practice good silviculture, but also the economic benefits that flow to their communities through indirect economic impacts. Secondly is water benefits, the role that forests play in both moderating water flows, but also reducing harmful pollutants from accessing stream water or groundwater. The third is human health mediated through forest's ability to reduce air pollution, particularly around urban centers. The fourth is on biodiversity, right? The forest's ability to support a wide variety of species and therefore to ensure biodiversity is obviously very important. And a fifth, which is sort of cross-cuts across all those other 4, is invasive species, right? A well-managed forest will contain some provisions for controlling or eliminated invasive species, which in turn will have a positive impact on those other benefits we talked about. So we all kind of know this, right? Like we've read the papers, we spent time in the woods, we know that forests provide these values. But then when it comes time to actually create a project, to bring financing in, to bring investment into these forests, it's difficult to talk about those other values. We instead tend to just default to what's the timber value, what's the carbon value, right? What's the value that's immediately monetizable? And we think that's a problem. So what we've been doing is trying to figure out how do you begin to tell the story comprehensively of those other values. And the first step, we believe, is through data visualization. So we have partnered with Transparency to create a tool that compiles more than 20 previously disparate data sources into one centralized map, and then allows you to overlay our project areas on those various maps. So you can see how different aspects of our projects interact and influence with these important other forest values. This initial iteration of the tool explores our Central Appalachian project, which, as you can see here, runs from northern Pennsylvania all the way down south through Alabama. This region is a particular importance for the Family Forest Carbon Program because forests there have suffered from a legacy of high grading or diameter limit cutting, which has sort of degraded their ability to produce timber and carbon and these other values. And also, there are conversion risks that are present throughout much of this landscape. We cannot show the exact locations of properties that we work with for privacy concerns. And so this tool allows us a good way to show the overall landscape that we're working in and therefore the impact that we're having. This tool also, as you'll see, includes a dashboard with key information about the program itself. Now, what is the intention of this tool? It's to provide more nuanced and relevant information to the stakeholders of the program. So who are those stakeholders? Could be the landowners themselves. It could be our partners who are working to promote the program on the ground and in communities. It could be our donors who've contributed to building this program, or our grantors who are providing us the resources to enroll more landowners and to steward those landowners through the process. It could be the buyers of the environmental attributes that are produced by the program, including, but hopefully not limited to, carbon credits, right? All of these stakeholders really want to understand, and we know this from conversations with them, how these projects intersect with all these important forest values. And so that's the intention of this visualization tool. And as I mentioned before, it's hosted by Transparency, our technology partner, and I just want to thank them for helping us with this. So how would you use this tool? You would use this tool to see how our project locations overlap with the benefits that are important to you as a stakeholder. So Lynn is going to walk us through this in more detail, but just to say, here's an example where on the left, you can see at a county level, the relative density of acres that are involved in the project, right? And on the right, we've overlaid that with data from the TPO reports from the U.S. Forest Service, which sort of show mill locations of various kinds. So this allows you sort of at a glance to see where we're enrolling land and how that relates to where forest products are being manufactured and produced. In terms of the data sources that we are using here, each data layer includes information on the source, how it is displayed, and why it is important. And there are a number of organizations who've generated this critical data in a publicly available format, which we are then using within this tool. And I want to just thank a couple of them. The U.S. Forest Service, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Nature Conservancy all have data sets that this first draft of the tool uses. In particular, the Forest Service, I want to say, great data from their forest to faucets assessment, which helps us assess where are the forests that we're working on that have high or very high importance to surface drinking water. And then the timber products output data set, which is really wonderful in terms of understanding the intersection between a carbon program on the ground and that long-term demand for sustainable wood fiber. We are actively engaging with stakeholders to understand what additional data would be more useful, and we'll circle back to this at the end of the webinar. These maps and these data sources we're going to show you today are an initial attempt based on our initial conversations with a variety of stakeholders. So keep that in the back of your mind. This tool will only improve as we get feedback from you and others about what is most important to you in terms of how the program operates and how it helps landowners secure these values across the eastern United States. Okay, that's, I think, all of the mostly boring introduction. So, Lynn, I want to turn it over to you for the juicy tidbits of diving into this data itself.
Yeah, thank you, Nate. So I'm gonna jump to the tool. Um, just checking, Nate, can you give me a thumbs up if that you can see the tool now? Okay, thank you. So yeah, thank you. Nate gave a good intro to our project. So just to repeat again a little bit, this is our first version and is initially focused on this Appalachians region that you see highlighted here. And actually the number of acres that you see, which is the total acres enrolled in this project, has actually increased. So we need to update that, but we have currently over 140,000 acres just in this project, and that represents many family landowners across this landscape who have committed to a 20-year agreement of improved forest management to address those challenges that Nate talked about of a history of more degrading forms of harvest. So this specific look is all about that project. So already highlighted when you jump into the map are the states that we have enrolled land. Going a little bit deeper, I'm going to first turn on and show the counties layer. So that is here. And like Nate said, I'll zoom in a little bit. The darker blue areas are where we have a higher concentration of acres enrolled. And you can get a little bit more information as well if you click on any of these county boundaries. And it'll show you both the number of ownerships in this county that are enrolled and the sum of acres across those ownerships. So looks like roughly in Bedford, Pennsylvania, we have 15 different individual ownerships enrolled, with it looks like an average acreage size of roughly 100 acres per ownership enrolled. So that's high level there. I'm gonna now actually make this layer a little bit opaque, and then I'll start layering, just picking a few to sort of demo here on top of that. So first I'll jump to this connectivity and climate flow layer. So this is produced by the Nature Conservancy. And maybe zooming in a little bit more, what this is showing here is as climate changes, we want to be seeing still some intact areas of forest and ecosystems, so that as different populations and species might need to move where they're located to adapt to changing climate, they actually have the space and the corridors to do so. So the blue areas here are places that actually do have those really intact ecological pathways. And the orange areas are where those are more lacking. So for us, that might translate to the places in blue are places that we might especially want to be protecting because they are these really important intact ecological areas for population flow due to climate. And the orange areas are where we might want to focus more restoration to prevent fragmentation and keep those areas intact, which is what something like a improved forest management project can do by giving the financial and technical assistance so that land can stay in these family ownerships and not be further fragmented. So I'm going to turn that one off, and now jump again. Nate already talked a little bit about this one, but this is a great layer produced by the Forest Service, the Timber Products Output layer. And so this will show both locations of mills, and then also it might be a little small here, but you can see it shows the type of product produced and processed by that mill. So whether it's hardwoods, softwoods, or a mix of both. And this is important to our project because we are intending through improving forest management to protect a sustainable supply of timber in the medium to long term by preventing more unsustainable forms of harvesting that might be trending historically in these places. So it's important to us to know where the mills are and what types of wood products they're producing so that our program can support those. Um, I'm gonna jump now to the some of these water quality options. Actually, sorry, first I'll start with surface drinking water. So this is getting at one of those key findings that Nate mentioned about how improved forest management affects all these other really critical benefits, and that is in terms of drinking water supply. So what this layer is showing is in these darker areas, those are going to be more important and critical to the drinking water supply downstream, and the lighter areas are slightly less important. Um, in this whole geography, or in a majority of this geography, we're seeing these are all pretty important areas to the downstream drinking water. So yeah, just important to remember how improving forest management, keeping these forests healthy, and preventing those more degrading forms of harvest can also help support that drinking water supply. Um, I'll turn that one off and also show we actually have several different water quality indicators here. So we have different nutrient related ones, so phosphorus and nitrogen, as well as some that are going to tell us a little bit about pathogen risk. And so for us, these are important, and for stakeholders, these might be important as well in thinking about how can we understand what today and long term the potential nutrient needs are of our enrolled forests, or the forests we might hope to enroll. And maybe if there's some areas where actually we're pretty concerned, which is what this layer tells us, that there's not going to be enough of a certain nutrient to keep these forests healthy long term, that might tell us or tell our stakeholders this is a place to prioritize for more intervention. Maybe that's something that goes in their forest management plan that landowners are getting from the Family Forest Carbon Program, things like that. Just because what we hope to do with these projects is both create benefits today, but also create durable benefits over time. So this can help inform some of those future management things that we might do to keep the forest there durably. I'll turn those off and jump now to a layer that we grabbed from some NASA data sets, and this is a fire alerts layer. So similar thing of why we thought this might be interesting to some of our stakeholders. You'll see there's not so many fire alerts actively right now in these areas, but it's a good thing for us to keep our eye on, because again, this will help tell us about if the patterns of fire are changing in these regions. We want to know about that, so then our projects can help landowners plan to keep their forest resilience to fires going forward. So there could be things we need to do today as we help them and help resource improving their forest management, or things that help us plan for management interventions in the future that would help with that. I'm just going to show a couple more here. One that could be interesting for folks interested in biodiversity are some of these species richness and plant species layer. So I'm going to start with the plant species. I'm going to turn off the counties for just a second and zoom in. So this one is cool. It'll show you the top, like very specifically, the top species across these landscapes, even including photos. So you can see really direct ties if there is a specific species of concern that is important to you. And especially for our landowners, this is something that a lot of landowners like to hone in on, and they have species that are important to them. It has pictures, it'll tell you the name. There's a little bit more information if you click into the layers, and that is across the whole landscape. For all of these, if as y'all dig into this, if you want a little bit more information, there's an information icon that'll tell you more of the what, the how, and the why, and we'll link out to the actual source of the data. So lots to explore here for any of these layers. And there's a few ways that you can analyze this as well. I won't go into all those today just to save time for questions, but there's ways to kind of view this over time and how these different data sets are changing over time. So that's a quick intro of just a couple of the layers in the map. That's actually just one half of this tool. There's a second half I'm going to jump to now, which is the dashboard. And so this is where you'll find an overview as well as a whole bunch of documentation and things that we hear frequently from our stakeholders that they want to know more about the project. So starting off, there's just kind of an overview. Digging in, I'll start just showing quickly on the governance and status. So this is all about what registry we use, which also has a lot more information about kind of the standards that our project is adhering to and our methodology and all of the accounting of how we actually are quantifying the benefits. It also will display our auditors, both past and current, and then our key technical partners, the Nature Conservancy and Terra Carbon. There's also a status option here, which this specific project actually has already had its first credit issuance. So we've completed all of these status steps from concept to issuance, and we're undergoing our second verification for issuance right now. But if we had done this with an earlier stage project, then maybe not all of these would be filled in yet. I'll jump to our key performance indicators. So we have a little bit more on co-benefits, quantification. You can see our VCU forecast, and as well as how much we've actually produced relative to that forecast. So that first issuance I just talked about was on just our very small pilot program in our first year of FFCP. So we haven't produced much of our expected volume quite yet, but we've enrolled a lot more acres since then and plan to keep enrolling a lot more. So the forecasted carbon credit issuance is obviously much higher, but this will sort of track over time how our issuance correspond to our forecasts. On the additionality section, there's a lot of great information about our methodology, which is Vera Methodology 45. There's a really great explainer video, and then we also have made intentionally really transparent here the R code that underlies our carbon accounting methodology. This was authored by our technical partner, Terra Carbon. So there's a direct link here. And basically what this is the exact code that we used to implement VM45, which is a dynamic baseline methodology that uses a matched control and matches our project stands to the most similar FIA plots that are nearby based on a list of covariates that tell us that that's a really high quality match. So this is kind of inspired by like clinical trials or quasi-experimental design methods where we really want to isolate the project as a thing that made the difference. And so we do that by tracking our project areas, using those really similar FAA plots as our baseline beyond which we sort of quantify the additional benefit. So exactly how we do all of that and the code that makes that happen is publicly available at that GitHub repository for anyone who wants to dive in and explore or even replicate that if you're also using Vera Methodology 45. Okay, I will jump again a little bit to this documentation section. So here you'll find several more documents of things that we get asked about pretty frequently. So one is a description of how we differentiate between removals and reductions in our project, practice overview. So that will tell you all about the specific things that a landowner is signing up for when they participate in our project. So what is the actual prescription that they're doing, and it'll describe kind of how we also provide forest management plans and things like that. It also includes our first validation and verification report for folks who might be interested in that in our project's description. Going over to this section on landowners, we have a summary of our landowner contract. So what exactly is a landowner signing and what are the terms of that is in there. We have some information on different program milestones and annual reporting that we have, and then a whole section with more information on our methodology, just because we know that's a key thing that the Family Forest Carbon Program is doing, is we're the first to use this methodology, and we're excited about it, and know that it might not be familiar to everyone. So there's lots more great information here. We have our ex-ante rating from B0. We have a methodology infographic that summarizes it really well. We also have, for those of y'all who might be familiar with American Forest Foundation's work on the Permanence Trust, we have a document there that talks about that, as well as an explainer that's pretty in-depth about our project level permanence fund. So that's how we, as a project on the project scale, are already implementing a trust or fund based process to ensure the durability of our claims. So I won't get into more of that now, but lots of really great information there if you are interested. Last thing to show here is there's a really great multimedia section that is full of landowner stories. So there's videos. One that I'll highlight quickly is this first one here about Susan Benedict. Susan was the third landowner to ever enroll in FFCP. And this is a bit of an aside, but I don't know if any of you all saw the recent movie Hoppers. I took my 5-year-old son there a couple months ago, and long story short, the movie is all about this girl who is trying to bring back beavers to a pond because she realized what an important species that is to the health of the ecosystem of the pond. I talk about that because Susan actually saw that she was bringing back beavers to her property after enrolling in the Family Forest Carbon Program. So I just thought it was really cool that the movie Hoppers was showing that too. But anyways, her story is in here, and a whole bunch of other ones are in here that could be of interest. There's also some just written stories. So one I'll highlight is on John Schmidt at the top here, and he has a really great story about how his participation in the Family Forest Carbon Program is helping him protect the native plants that he has on his property and that are important to him, like red clover and pink lady slipper orchids. So he was excited about that, and we have a story there too. So I will stop the demo there. There's a lot more we could show. And then we have, I think, Nate, one more slide on next steps. So I'll pass it to you for that one.
Yeah, so thank you, Lynn, for that whirlwind tour. A couple things I just want to make really clear to people, and then we're going to go to the excellent questions we've been getting. First of all, this tool is live right now. So after this webinar, we will send you the recording of the webinar, but also the link to the tool. And we really encourage you all to dig in, look at it, continue to send us your questions and your critiques and your complaints, because that's the way that we will get the tool to be better. So that's the first thing. Secondly, remember that this tool is just a first step, right? And we'll get to some of this in the questions. We put it out there with some data sources that we were familiar with or that some of our partners had recommended to us. But we are not at all under the impression that this tool is doing a perfect job of telling the story of the impacts of well-managed family forests. We know it can improve, and it will improve over time. And it will improve over time primarily through your help, right? If you go to the tool and you feel like something's missing, or you feel that there's a better data set than the one that we're using, or you feel there's a better way to tell the story, you can do us a really big favor by passing that information along to us. Finally, if you want to partner generally in using this tool or providing those suggestions, please reach out to Nicole Goodman. Her email is on this slide, but is also will be included in the follow-up materials. So again, this is not just something we're sort of planning on doing. It's something we've done, and we now need your help to do it better over time. So with that, I just want to thank everyone for participating, and I want to move to questions and answers. Before we do, I just want to formally introduce Nicholas Wallendahl. And Nicholas, why don't I just let you introduce yourself, if you wouldn't mind coming off of camera or on camera? Thank you.
Worries. Thanks, Nate. So I'm the co-founder of Transparency, the technology provider that helped AFF build this tool. So happy to answer any questions. We've been building geospatial-led sites for customers globally. Many of them are in carbon markets, but we also work with NGOs to help them explain the story of impact. So yeah, happy to answer any questions or give someone a more in-depth demo offline.
Okay. Thank you very much, Nicholas. And we have one question that's going to be, I think, for you specifically. So we're now going to move over to questions, and there's a mix of questions and suggestions. And I think, Lynn, most of these are for you. So let's start about one from the chat, which is, both you and I mentioned the fact that in the Central Appalachians, a lot of these lands have been high graded. Are there programs that provide financial assistance to forest landowners or to sawmills to reduce high grading?
Yes, so the Family Forest Carbon Program is one of those programs. Yeah, both our program and there are others out there. I believe some of the NRCS opportunities for landowners may also help provide some technical or financial assistance for landowners. But our program, the Family Forest Carbon Program, we provide technical and financial assistance to landowners who maybe have had a history of high grading on their property or see a risk in the future of undergoing high grading without just a little bit more support than they might have had historically. So that could look like a landowner who has had the land passed down to them and they kind of don't know where to start in terms of forest management. That description actually applies to quite a few of the landowners in the Family Forest Carbon Program. A lot of times they haven't necessarily engaged in forest management in an intentional sense in the past. It's kind of happened to them because they just didn't know where to start. And so we provide both annual payments to help financially support these landowners in their forest management, as well as technical assistance in the form of forest management plans that each landowner gets and that will help them with their specific goals and their specific property. So ours is definitely an option out there. We're not the only ones, but yeah, definitely there are programs like that.
And Lynn, just keeping in mind that maybe not everyone on the line is deeply versed in forestry. Can you just quickly define what high grading is and why it's a problem?
Yeah. So in short, high grading is when you go in for a harvest and you just kind of take the biggest, widest, best trees and leave maybe the only the smaller and maybe less healthy trees behind. And if you do that repeatedly over time, you're left with a more and more degraded forest, and very often a less valuable timber asset as well, by just focusing on those like high value trees and leaving the rest behind. So in our program, we do enable harvesting throughout the contract term for a majority of our practices. But what we'll have landowners do is actually avoid that practice of just taking kind of the biggest and best trees out during their harvest and instead maybe do a thin throughout type of harvest or something else that will help keep up the health of their forest if the landowner wants to harvest at all, but doesn't kind of lead to that progressive degrading state over time.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Lynn. And then to answer the second half of that question, um, FFCP, both the Family Forest Carbon Program and the American Forest Foundation, do not provide any direct assistance to sawmills, but I actually think that's a really important thing to raise. This is all an ecosystem, right, that works together. And the Family Forest Carbon Program is really focused on the landowner part of it, right? Giving landowners the support they need to avoid high grading and to continue to build the value of their property over time. And that's only one part of the ecosystem. So it is really critical that we also find ways for rural economies to function without high grading. And that's where things like wood innovation grants that the Forest Service provides are really critical. Figuring out how you can match up the proper silviculture with forest products and manufacturing, which we know are critical to maintain a working forest landscape. So FFCP is one part of the puzzle. It's absolutely not the only part of the puzzle, and we really look forward to working in partnership with others to make sure that we have a comprehensive solution for all of the stakeholders that depend on these forests. Um, Moving into a few of the other questions. Um, just one to mention really quickly, April suggested a different data layer other than the one we're using for fire starts. And I just want to say thank you, April. That's exactly the kind of feedback we're looking for, right? Is that we do not have an encyclopedic knowledge of all the data sets that are out there. And so if anyone sees one of our data sets as, you know what, it'd be better if you use this other one, that is really helpful. So thanks for that. Um, Lynn, the supplemental documents you showed were largely drawn from our Central Appalachians project. And a really good question is how many of those documents also apply to the Family Forest Carbon Program in other regions, namely the North region and in our Fields to Forest program, or are there significant differences?
Yeah, good question. So these documents will be almost identical for our improved forest management work in other states. Like Nate referred to, we also have a specific VCS project that we call our North project. And so that's all of our improved forest management in the Midwest as well as the Northeast. We group those landowners enrolling in those states together and then do all of our monitoring and reporting and verification together as a separate project in that region. Our improved forest management, though, in the North and in the Appalachians is really very similar. So if you are reading those documents, it's going to be almost identical for improved forest management. A little bit less so with our reforestation work, the Fields and Forests program that's in the US Southeast, just because that's a different project activity. So the North Project and the Appalachians improved forest management is quite similar, but the reforestation work, it uses a different methodology, so that'll be a little bit different in some ways. But yeah, the North should be similar. Same with Midwest.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Just to say, I have a method to my madness of how I'm moving through the questions, so I'm going to get to all of them, and we will have time for additional ones. So if you have others, please feel free to state them. One question: is there a time frame for expanding this map to include Michigan, specifically the Upper Peninsula? So just to say generally, we do plan to expand this map to incorporate the other project areas that FFCP is engaged in. The specific time frame, we're not really sure, but probably months, not years. So that is our ambition over time, is to have more of the area covered by FFCP. And then possibly, there are important family forests that are way beyond where FFCP is operating. So that's also something that we are looking at and considering is to what extent can this tool be used beyond the boundaries just of the Family Forest Carbon Program. Lynn, I'm going to ask Nicholas a couple of questions, and while I'm doing that, I'm going to ask you this question so you can think about it. How are beavers beneficial? And I think that's important because you and I have met with a lot of landowners, and some landowners really like the idea of restoring beaver habitat, and some landowners really do not like the idea of restoring beaver habitat. So we'll come back to that one. Nicholas, couple questions for you. First, uh, are there any? Sorry, actually, to go back to this. Yeah. What does it take to build this kind of portal? And how do you think about feedback loops and how that changes a tool like transparency, both for us as one client, but also in the overall architecture of the tool itself?
Yeah, good question. So we have spent 2 years developing this geospatial tool, and I think we can boil down client client uh, value into four buckets. One is aggregation of data, right? A lot of these data sets that you were shown today are typically siloed data sets. And so it's very cumbersome to go to the various um, data sources to get that data. So we're kind of a one-stop shop. So we've built a tool that is automated in such a way that you can give us a location file and then we can query all of those different data sets. The second kind of lever that we pull on is interpretation of that data. I think as we're seeing, a lot of this data is becoming open source data. So it's not actually a problem of getting the data, but it is very complex. And so interpreting it is key. And so what we try and do is build these dashboards that democratize complex topics, democratize geospatial data. The third lever, just quickly, is communication. So um, really leaning on, in some cases, AI to help people via chatbots uh, basically query information. So you could ask, for example, how have canopy heights in this area evolved over the last 5 years? And it will give you a very simple text-based response. And then the fourth component is customization. So we're a small team, we're a startup, so we're very nimble and we take feedback on. Many of our customers choose to white label the solution, so we match the branding one for one. So in terms of feedback loops, this isn't a product that we've just built and have published. We are continually working on it. Similar to Nate's call for feedback, we welcome feedback either from clients or just the general public, because ultimately, what are we trying to do? We're trying to mobilize capital for nature. And one of the key ways in which you can do that is increase transparency, increase understanding of all of these great initiatives that are ongoing.
Thank you, Nicholas. And then one narrower question, which I will
Mm.
answer from AFF's perspective, but I think you might have a more detailed answer. Has the transparency tool been built with the requirements of the EUDR, which the European Union Deforestation Regulation, in mind? And from AFF's point of view, that was not a specific objective of our instance of this tool, but I don't know, Nicholas, if that's on transparency's radar.
Yeah, it certainly is. But don't want to derail the conversation. So happy to take it offline. But it's something we've been thinking about, and many of the capabilities that we have map across to that regulation.
Okay. And I think we will send along with the email contact information for transparency. I don't want to put Nicholas on the spot and say we're going to share his personal information, but anyone on this webinar will have the ability to reach out to transparency and further these discussions. Okay, Lynn, are you ready to talk about why beavers are beneficial? And then we still have some other meaty questions on the backside of that.
Yes. Okay. Quick intermission for beavers. Yeah, I guess just to be clear, I don't think every landowner is going to have that goal that they want to see more beavers on their property. It was something that was really cool for Susan and what she was looking for from her property. But if you don't want that on your property, that does not have to be part of your goals. I will say beavers do produce pretty unique habitat just with how they change a pond or a water system and can kind of help create wetlands downstream. Sometimes those wetlands can be used as like a fire break in some cases if you're in a high fire risk area. So I'd say it probably depends on the landowner's goals, but yeah, if that's the type of ecosystem and the type of wildlife, that habitat that the beavers create that you are looking for, then it could be something that you could work on improving your forest management to sort of gear towards. But if that's not the case, there's lots of different things that you could do to see different wildlife.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Lynn. Couple other questions, and remember, absolutely, we have a couple more minutes, so if you have a question you're dying to ask, please include it. This is, I think, mainly for you, Lynn, but Nicholas, I'd also like to get your thoughts on this. Are there any ground or field measured data integrated into these data sets?
Yeah, I can start. So my understanding is that several of the layers that we pulled in do tie back to ground measurements or maybe some remote sensing data sets too. So I would check out the specific sources for each of those data sets to see exactly how they do that. One thing we haven't done though is we, as our project, have a lot of field measurement data that we are collecting and taking repeated measurements on for tens of thousands of trees at this point across these landscapes. And so that is not specifically going to show up on the map for some of those kind of commercial sensitivity reasons that Nate talked about with like the explicit plot locations. But in some of that documentation, you will see more information about our monitoring reports that will talk a lot about that data. And then in that GitHub that I showed, you'll see kind of the field measured data that we're pulling in for our baselining as well. So in some ways it's integrated, but maybe not fully. And there's probably more in the specific data sources. And yeah, Nicholas, I don't know if maybe you know how other projects are doing that in different ways.
Yeah, I think well said, Lynn. Um, Ground truth data is a component of some of the publicly available data sets that you see on the map, but we haven't included AFF ground truth data yet. But it's something that we can do, and it's something that we do with a lot of other clients, and it works quite well. So, just as one example, you can bring in um, on the biodiversity side of things, like biodiversity camera traps, where you can see delayed imagery of threatened species. So that's a really good way of adding to the biodiversity storytelling component. And then more on the carbon side of things, we have canopy height measurements that have been embedded by some projects, and then you can overlay our canopy height model on top of that and see how it compares. Um, so it's definitely something that we can do, and I'm sure it'll be a next step for this map.
Thank you, Nicholas. So a couple other questions about the tool and the data, and then we have a couple questions about FFCP. First, just acknowledging a comment that we should use this tool to tell as many success stories as possible, which include the steps the landowners have taken to achieve that success. And we absolutely agree with that. So that's a huge point of emphasis for AFF is to try and share what landowners have achieved and how they've achieved it, and also to be very transparent about the challenges they faced, right? Because although we do want to tell a positive story, we don't want to skip over the fact that this is hard. And it's hard more than for anyone else for the landowners themselves, right? Who are most often not professional forest managers. They don't have a background in forestry. They have a professional life of their own that takes up all of their time. They have family obligations. And then on top of that, we're asking them to do a lot of very complicated things on their land that benefit us, and usually we're not compensating them, right? So we also need to be real about that challenge in our communication. So thank you for that, Mike. Scott, a question from Scott. Some data are from the Forest Service. Do we have any data from the Climate Change Tree Atlas included in a layer, or would that be a new addition? I'm going to answer that, and then Lynn, as you frequently do, you can fact check me if I'm wrong. I don't believe, Scott, we do have any data from the Climate Change Tree Atlas, and that would be a great example of something that it'd be great to follow up on and understand. where that would fit within this tool. Okay, moving on to a couple questions about FFCP. And Lynn, I think you're probably best positioned to answer that. If a landowner is enrolled in the Family Forest Carbon Program, do they have to use the payments to improve their forested land? So that's the first question.
Yeah, no, there are not any constraints around how a landowner uses their payments. They're free to spend that money however they wish. We hear from some landowners that they are using it to do specific treatments or improvements to their woods. Some landowners are using it to help pay their land taxes, which can be quite expensive, and so they need some financial assistance in order to even just keep paying those taxes and owning the land, or they could use it for something else. What one of the things that we hear a lot is something that leads to those more degrading forms of harvest is actually a short-term cash flow need that a landowner has. So it could be like an urgent medical issue or sending a kid to college, something that's maybe a little bit unexpected. And so part of what we hope our payments are doing is helping offset those more urgent cash flow needs so that someone doesn't have to resort to a more degrading form of harvest to get that cash that they need and instead has a little bit of money available coming in, some extra revenue, so they can make those choices and still keep their forest healthy. So lots of options. There's no constraints on how a lender spends that money. We do give them a forest management plan to help guide them to what would help them achieve their goals in terms of forest health or all the other things they might care about in their woods. But we don't prescribe that.
And then the second half of that question, which I'll go ahead and take, is are any landowners enrolled in FFCP also pairing the payments from FFCP with NRCS or EPA conservation or water quality programs? And the answer is yes. We do have some landowners who also participate in, for example, EQIP, right? However, in general, those programs are very difficult for family landowners to ask or to access. So one of the things that we are exploring is how we can help landowners access those programs in a more proactive fashion. Now, FFCP already does that to some extent. As Lynn mentioned, every landowner who enrolls in the program gets a management plan, and they actually have a choice of do they want a management plan that we write for them, or do they want a reimbursement payment that they can use to pay a third party to write a management plan. And the reason I mention that is often what landowners will do is they will pay a consultant to write a sort of NRCS compliant management plan, which then makes them eligible for EQIP, right? Similarly, by participating in FFCP, a lot of times that management plan will make a landowner eligible for a current use program in the state that they are, or for forest certification, or for a lot of programs where the gate is, do you have a forest management plan, right? And a lot of these landowners who come to us, I think, Lynn, 78% of our enrollees don't have a forest management plan. So just by virtue of getting one, that kind of opens a lot of doors of other programs they could participate in. We are exploring to what extent can we not only open that door, but then kind of hold the hands of the landowners and help them walk through in coordination with those other partners, right? So that's sort of an untapped source of potential impact for the program. And one, I think, oh, sorry, two final questions. One from Stephanie. Have any data sets been sourced from individual state forestry data? And I can answer that. The answer is no, unless the sort of national data sets are drawing on that state level forestry data. And Lynn, I don't know if you know within those data sets of any that you could sort of identify that that's a source of the data. Yeah. So the short answer is, Steffi, is technically no, but possibly yes, depending on where that data is originating from. And apologies that we don't know the answer to that. And then final question, how much of the treatment costs are covered by the Family Forest Carbon Program? And here, Lynn, I think the question is how much of the costs plan, which I think would include like treatment of invasive species or timber stand improvement or whatever is needed, are covered by the FFCP?
Yeah, what I hear is a forester answer. I'll give it here, even though I'm not actually a forester, but it depends. And it depends on what is actually in the forest management plan. So I think it is important to say that it depends because each landowner's property is different. The history of management on their property is different, and their goals for what they want to get out of their forest is going to be a little bit different, and then the cost to actually get them there is going to be different depending on that. So it's a little bit hard to say. We do know of some landowners who are able to complete the recommendations in their forest management plan fully with the FFCP payments. Other folks, I do think whatever they wanted to do on their land does cost them more, and so the payments that we make to them are a contribution to that. Maybe don't fully cover that. That could look more like things like that take maybe a competing vegetation type of treatment. That it is going to be pretty costly to get a service provider to come out and do that, depending on the area that you're treating and how severe the competing vegetation is, and things like that. So yeah, it depends. It should make a really substantial contribution, and in some cases, it should cover all of it. And in some cases, landowners are choosing, at least so far in the program, to uh, just kind of let their forest grow and mature, and maybe we'll take some other steps later on. So it does depend on a whole lot of things, but it should make a really substantial contribution. And in the long term, I do also want to mention that you're getting these family forest carbon program payments, you're getting your forest management plan, and you should be getting a more valuable timber asset as your forest becomes more healthy over time. So you're growing that asset too, which can hopefully help offset future costs or be passed down to your heirs or things like that.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lynn. We have made it through all the questions, so thank you for all the excellent questions. Nicholas, thank you, and thanks to Transparency. I think you've heard on this webinar a lot of interest, and we'd encourage all of you to reach out to Transparency. They've been a great partner in developing this. Thank you, Lynn, for your time. Thank you to the communications team who set up this webinar. It's always a real joy to do these webinars because they're so well prepared. And finally, thank you to all of you who are participants. By virtue of you coming here, you've sort of indicated that you care about and are committed to the health of family forests in the United States. I would furthermore note, just from looking at the participant lists, many of you are donors or work for organizations who have provided grants to FFCP. And I just want to say, we could not do any of this work without you, and your contributions are absolutely critical to securing the values that we've talked about today, both for the landowners who own these lands and for the public that depends on them and for the future generations for whom we are stewarding these resources collectively. So thank you very much for that. And a final reminder, if you want to make one more contribution, you can go use this tool and tell us what you think about it. What's good, what's bad, what could be made better. And that is our commitment to you. We will continue to improve the way we tell the story of this program and of these forests over time. So with that, once again, thanks everyone for joining us and have a great rest of your day.